So I'd like to welcome everyone to another of TTA summer sessions today. Today we're joined by Sarah Capewell, and she's doing her talk on how to attract international clients. So I will pass over to Sarah now. I'll just start sharing her slides for her, and she can begin.
Thanks, Julius. I appreciate being having an assistant for this so that I don't have to do too many things at once. Good morning, everyone. It's actually nice to see people's faces. I do so many webinars where it's just a black screen and I'm sort of talking to myself. So it's nice. If you could smile every now and then or just put a thumbs up, that'd be great, just to make me feel like I'm not alone. If you don't know who I am, I just thought I'd give a very, very, very brief background so you can kind of see where I'm coming from. I think it's important to kind of establish that. And then it's absolutely fine to ask questions as we go. I might get carried away, so feel free to just say, hang on, can I ask a question? It's not a problem. And there's a lot of information. So what I will try and do is pause. I'm doing 3 main points, so I'll try and pause after each one, but just put questions in the chat as they go. Okay, so I have been a teacher for 17 years, I think. In my most recent job, I was head of English and head of boarding in a full boarding prep school. So that's where I started to get my first kind of taste of the international student sort of world. And I worked very closely with our head of admissions. So I left during early part of COVID and I set up my tutoring business, Ask to Tuition. And my intention was to just tutor English. Not that it's a just at all, but I was intending to be an English tutor and that's all I wanted. And then because I had a couple of Chinese clients already and I sort of understood the expectations of the Chinese market, and I really wanted those daytime hours, which is what I hear, I think 98% of the time from people who work with me. I thought, look, I don't want to be leaving my job to work weekends and evenings because it's just as antisocial almost as it was before. So I started getting some Chinese clients and then I started working with a Chinese agent and then that grew to other agents and they started asking me for other subject areas. So it did kind of grow organically at that point. And now I work with agents worldwide. But by far, my biggest market is in China. And in February of this year, late January, early February, I took on an employee who works for me in Shanghai. So she's helping me to grow the market within Shanghai itself. So definitely I would say that that China is sort of my niche, which I'll be talking about in a minute. So that's a little bit about me. Julius, would you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so I could talk all day about this, but I appreciate that you're probably not going to want to sit for the next 7 hours listening to me talk. So I've tried to kind of focus on 3 key areas for today in terms of how you can attract clients. So the first one is really about the Chinese market and why it can be lucrative, because yes, we want daytime hours, but I'm sure all of you, like myself, want to be paid what you're worth and be paid based on your experience and your expertise. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why the Chinese market it can be very lucrative. I'm going to talk about the importance of having a niche, because that's definitely what got me to the point where I was attracting the attention of agents. And then finally, understanding the boarding school market. And I think it's absolutely vital that if you want to be successful in the international market and you want to support particularly Chinese students coming to the UK, you need to understand why boarding schools play a huge part in that. Okay, so there are 3 sort of areas we'll be looking at, but you can feel free to ask me questions on anything to do with international education. Okay, Julius, next slide, please. All right, so this is just, we're going to start talking about the Chinese market and why it's lucrative. These are my the main agents I've been working with since the start, really. So I try and see them probably 5 or 6 times a year. They're based predominantly in London. So we spend a lot of time kind of in person, and that's been really crucial for my business and the growth of my business. Okay, next slide. Right, so I tried to arrange the information in a way that would be sort of digestible, but also to give you a sense of the different kind of stages, I suppose, in terms of depth of understanding. So at the top, the first thing you absolutely need to be aware of, if you're not already, is that Chinese families really, really value education. And middle-class families, well-off families will do whatever they can to get access to the best tutoring, the best support. They want the best British boarding schools in order to get to the best university, okay? And for them, that's crucial. So the boarding schools they choose will often be based very much on which ones have the best reputation in order for them to get into the best university. And I don't know how much you know about the schools they look at, but I'll talk about that a little bit when I get to the sort of the boarding school slides. And, you know, in terms of the cultural differences, and this is they talking from my experience with the hundreds of families I've worked with and the ages I've worked with, but the Chinese families that I've supported, they look at schools which are going to give them the best academic preparation for success at university. Not always, and some families come to me because I'm also an educational agent, and I support students when I place them in schools, so I have that sort of two-pronged approach, which is really helpful. But they will often say to me, you know, we want to have a school which is this far from the M25 because we want to be, you know, get on a plane to Heathrow. But they will look at schools which are known worldwide. Okay, so schools which have the gravitas. So that's kind of the basic awareness that you absolutely need to have when you're accessing the Chinese market. I suppose the next level down from that is your depth of subject knowledge. So you will get asked by agents what experience you have as an examiner, or which exam boards you have you are familiar with, and that doesn't matter whether it's 7+, 11+, 13+, GCSE, A level, or pre-U. They will want to know that. So don't be afraid to kind of share that expertise. I always, with every agent I work with, I have a services guide which has a biography of myself and my tutors, which allows them to see our expertise, and it helps. It's definitely helped me to kind of bring that edge as a specialist. So just make sure that if you've got that specific experience, that you share that with them. They will be reassured by that. The next sort of level below that is making sure that you understand what the parents are looking for in terms of how you deliver lessons. So some parents that we work with, they want to know what the next 2 months are going to look like. Some want to know what the next 2 years are going to look like. And often I'll work with parents. So I've got one family who just joined me, for example, their son is in year 3. Their plan is they want a day school in London up to 13+. They then want a boarding school from 13+ to 16. They then want to change between 16 and 18, and then they want G5 universities, which is Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, UCL, and King's, and that's the whole plan. Now, I have explained that at the age of 6 or 7, that's not something that we can you know, guarantee, and I'm sure all of us have had that as teachers or tutors, where you know, you get families coming to you and saying this is what we want. So but definitely giving them a long-term plan, they find that really reassuring. Okay, and then I suppose the final stage, which is where I'm at with Ask to Tuition, is having people on the ground. Okay, now I'm sure that you've seen that in China, for example, there's a lot of instability and there's political changes and things that I'm not going to go into today, but I've certainly found that things change on virtually a weekly basis. So when I speak to Chi, my employee, we're often having to change things on a weekly or a fortnightly basis. But having a network, having a strong network, and having that access to support is really important. And I've stopped working with many agents where I felt that they've not necessarily been aligned to me. So you need to make sure that when you're working with a Chinese agent, or any agent, in fact, that they are providing you with the support that you need, and that you're able to access the you know, sort of the broader picture. So when I work with agents, even if I can't speak to the parents because they don't speak English, I always say that on the WeChat group, because we use WeChat, which is the Chinese equivalent of WhatsApp, that I want to I can translate what the parent's saying. It might be a little bit iffy when you're looking at it, but it gives me a sense of what the parents are looking for. So I always try to make sure that there is transparency and that I'm involved in that process. Because when early on in the process, when I wasn't involved with the parents at all, and I was just getting the agent's perspective, there was a lot often further down the line discrepancies in terms of what I'd been told and what the parent was expecting. So you want to be as clear as you can be, so that you all understand what parents and what agents are expecting. Okay, any questions about this before we go to the next one? Shall we keep going, Julius, and then I can take questions as and when? Okay. The next one is the importance of having a niche, which I think is hugely important. I'm not entirely sure why this picture of me with somebody from international admissions and marketing celebrates that necessarily, but never mind. Can we go to the next one, please, Julius? Thank you. Okay, so I would definitely say that having a specialism rather than a generalist approach is hugely important to agents. Okay, it might well be that on your team you have 7 or 8 different people to support you, but when you start off, I think it's massively important that you say, I am a specialist in this. So I'm a specialist in the 11 plus, for example. I'm a specialist in 13 plus, I'm a specialist in scholarship. The agents really like that because they know and will come to trust you, and they will come back to you as that person. So for example, because I'd worked in a boarding prep school up to 13 plus, that was my bread and butter. You know, we were sending children off to the top boarding schools in the UK, and I would call myself a 13 plus expert, particularly scholarship to schools like Eton and Harrow. And the agent absolutely loved that because they could put those students to me and they were in safe hands. And then when they started saying, actually, we want a math support, we want a science support, we want whatever support, I was then able to bring in other people. But certainly having a specialism like that brought me more business than if I was trying to please everybody. And it's the same way that many Chinese families want 1 tutor per subject. So they won't necessarily want you to prepare all of the 11 plus. So with all of my Chinese families, I can't think of one ever who has had a tutor for 11 plus English and maths, even though there are many, many tutors who do both successfully. They want 1 for English and 1 for maths. And I've got one family at the moment who want 1 for non-verbal reasoning, 1 for verbal reasoning, 1 for maths, 1 for English, even though I've explained that, you know, that's not necessary. So it's just being aware of that. I obviously don't know which point you're at in terms of your forays into the international world, but I would definitely say that you need to have a services guide. You need to have a guide that showcases what you do, and that kind of goes through your experience and your expertise. If, for example, you have supported students at IGCSE, which is massively popular in China, if you supported students at IGCSE, share the percentage of students who have got a grade 8 or a grade 9, share the schools that they studied at, because that will reassure the parents that you're working with that you know your stuff. So in my services guide that I was sending out to agents, it's got a little bio about me, but it's short and sweet because they do not want to read lots of information. There's tons of infographics because they like to see, the agents I've worked with have liked to see sort of percentages and schools I've worked with, and I have a case study in there as well. But that very much kind of gives them the confidence that you know what you're talking about and that you've done this multiple times before. I think all of us are well aware of the next stage in terms of keeping on top of your game as a specialist, and you know, I think that's still huge. I still do that now I still do a bit of tutoring, and I still very much keep on top of my CPD, whether that's examiner training, whether that's going to webinars. As I'm a member of the Boarding School Association as an agent, I try and go to as many of their events as possible. And that keeps me abreast of changes, but it also allows me to see what people are looking for. And then the final kind of stage, I guess, is having that reputation and having a referral-based business. So I have families in Shanghai and Beijing that I work with independently that came from one family who recommended me to their friend, who recommended me to their friends. And I think, and one thing I found, and I'm happy to be for people to disagree with me, is that my London families that I work with, so my British families in London, are very reticent to share information. They want to keep that tutor all to themselves. Now, that's just my experience. Whereas the Chinese families, if they have a good tutor, they will recommend you to their friends. And that's been brilliant for me because I've now got something like 26 or 27 families in Beijing that me and my team support, starting from one family. So that gives you a sense of, you know, the fact that they're willing to share. And I think that's really, really good. And, you know, you want to be the go-to tutor. you want to be that person that they come to really give their child the chance of success. The agent, it's in their interest to find a good tutor because they're being paid in order to secure a a place in a school. So I don't know how much you are aware of how agents work, but they're very much the middleman. That's what I also do as well, so I can talk about this from a sort of position of experience. So the agent will often be contracted to work with a family many years before they come to the UK. So often, in year 2 or year 3 almost, and there's a very, very long process. And the agent will be given usually a retainer fee, and they will shortlist schools, and then once the child is into that school, they will be given an extra fee. So it's it can be a very lucrative business for agents. I didn't realise until a couple of years into it how much certain agents charge for this. It was mind-blowing to me, that the sort of fees that were being talked about here. But the agents play a very important part. I probably have, I think 60% of my work comes from agents and the remainder is from sort of independent families. I enjoy working with both. That's because I have now narrowed down the agents that I work with. So I've shed quite a few where I think I said before, it hasn't aligned with my ethos or my views. So I have a smaller pool of agents, but they're ones that I trust, they're ones that I meet with. They are the ones that I've shared with the TTA for the trip to China, for example. So they, it's very important to me that I work with people that I can trust and build that relationship with. But the many agents, particularly in China, will send you one student. They'll send you one and they'll see how it goes. That's been my experience so far. They've always sent me one, and I think, why have they sent me one student? And then they'll send me 2, 5, 10, 20. So it will snowball quite quickly, which is a good thing. I think I should probably answer some questions because I can see they're popping up. So shall I go through those now? Let me have a look. Right. Okay, I'll start with Matthew's. So no, I don't speak Mandarin, but and most of the agents I work with speak fluent English anyway. But one of the reasons I started working with Chi, who's my employee, was to get to those parents who perhaps are not going to necessarily work with an agent, but they really value a British tutor who understands both the international system and boarding schools in the UK. So you absolutely don't need to speak the language. Most of the agents, in fact, all of the agents will speak English to some degree. In terms of how many hours you can get as an individual tutor, I think there's no limit to that. So I was tutoring tons, like absolutely tons. And I think I said this to somebody yesterday that I was on a discovery call with, that it was very much a split timetable. So I still had my evenings and some of my weekends, because I wanted to make sure that those students, I got them through their exams. And then I was doing my 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Tutoring slot from students from mainland China. The time difference is probably my biggest irritation, because even though I've been doing this for years, every time it gets to the clock changes, it's a nightmare because the clocks don't change in China. So I'm constantly having to remind myself that everyone has to shunt backwards, or I have to shunt backwards or forwards an hour. But the time difference works really well for me. I hope I've answered that, Matthew, but tell me if I haven't. Zoom, yes, for the majority of the time, but if you're not aware, in China, there can be issues accessing any Google Meets or Google Classroom or anything like that, unless they have a VPN. So most of my students do have a VPN, so it isn't a problem. We use Google Docs, and that's super helpful because many of our students are at boarding school in the UK, but they fly back to China in the holidays. So otherwise it gets a bit tedious when you have to go between. But I have Tencent, which is Chinese Zoom, as a backup. So if Zoom isn't working, we use Vuv or Tencent. So that's really, really helpful. And for my younger students, I use FunClass, which is something that a platform that was designed by a fabulous tutor called Yan, and that works in China and in the UK. So I have a couple of options there. Anita, Yeah, so my agents are predominantly based in London, but they have multiple offices. So the owner of the biggest agency that I work with in China, she is more often than not out of the country, sort of traveling between their offices in Malaysia, China, Hong Kong, everywhere. But the staple agents within that organization that I work for is based in London, and I try and see the CEO every time she's back. But yes, most of them are based in London. Oh, Matthew, that's a good question. How did you learn to trust your agents? Okay, how long do we have? I think I went into this very naively. I just assumed everybody was like me, wanting the best for the students, wanting the best outcomes, and kind of, you know, working in partnership. The agents that I think trust came over time. So like I said, I'm working with agents now that I've worked with from the beginning, and the others that I haven't perhaps continued working with are when they decided to move students very quickly, and they get a referral fee when they move students. And I said, I don't think that's the right thing. They've only been in this school 2 years. I think they need to stay there. So that kind of, that made me feel very uncomfortable. But also when it was clear after 6 or 8 weeks of tutoring that this student would be unhappy, would struggle at a super academic school, and when I've passed that on, it's been ignored. So it's those kinds of things that have made me stop working with agents more than anything else. Penny, I can give you lists of agents. I'm happy to do that. I would probably suggest if I pop my email address at the end, or you find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, I share agent lists all the time. So I'm more than happy to do that for you. That's not a problem. Yes, so Catherine, in terms of, oh, that's a little, I've never seen that, a little thumbs up appeared. Catherine, yes, so if you follow the double reduction policy, there's lots and lots of different policies. They change all the time. But right now, it's no problem to be tutoring students and living outside of China. But, you know, things change all the time. That's one of the reasons I have Chi. So I will say, right, what are there any policy changes this week? Is there anything we need to be aware of? And I'm constantly looking at guidance that's coming out all the time. But yes, it can be a little bit of a minefield. The name of Chinese Zoom, yes. So if you look for Tencent, I think I put that in the chat. I don't know if everybody can see that. It's free. It's really easy to use, even if you don't understand Mandarin, which I don't. So that's a great backup to have, and all students can access that. Do I set my prices? Okay, so yes, I do set my prices. To start off with, oh gosh, pricing is one of those things, isn't it? It's so hard. To begin with, I was very green, I suppose. I was just desperate to get an agent to work with me. But I charged far too little. And then, you know, I became quite resentful about that over time. So now it's my prices, and the agency either decides to work with me or they don't. But I do, you know, I am not cheap, but that reflects the fact that I've been teaching for 17 years and my track record. But I would absolutely not, you know, not get into a negotiation where you're being sort of talked down from your prices. But that's why on my services guide, I have my prices on there, so that I'm not wasting time in a conversation with agents. They know what my prices are. They know what my group class prices are. And it, you know, they will often say, can you do a discount? Can you do reduction? Now I will give discounts on group classes because that doesn't make a massive difference to my profit. But for one-to-one lessons, I do not give discounts, no matter how many hours they book in advance. Okay. Yeah, Julius, don't let me forget then. I will get agent lists out to people, but I think it's probably easier if I give out my email address and I'll share that. What do the agents normally charge? Do you mean, Rose, what do they charge the parents? Just to clarify, I'm assuming that's perhaps what you mean. That varies. Us. Okay. Okay, fine. So that depends. It can be anything. So when I first started off, I was getting £65 an hour from agents, and I was not happy with that. And so now it can be anything. So I've had agents who've paid me 50, 60, 70 pounds an hour, up to 100, 120, 130. And I know tutors who, charge a lot more than that. So it just depends. But I would say, make sure that whatever you charge reflects, it reflects your experience. But also, one thing to be aware of is that, and I think I talk about this in terms of boundaries in a second, is making sure that you understand how much the agents expect from you in terms of time. Okay, I'll talk about that in a minute because I think I'm going to be repeating myself. But there's the price that I charge per hour. It's not just for that hour. It's obviously for the fact that I've been doing this for years, but it's also the amount of time that I'm necessarily then having to take on WeChat or sending the tutoring plans or liaising with parents. So there's a lot more to it than that kind of hourly rate. And I've tried various different ways of doing it with Chinese families. And I've said this is the amount per month. But the problem is that there can be a lot of flexibility in terms of them going between China and the UK. So they don't necessarily want a lesson at the same time every week for 3 months. So there's got to be a degree of flexibility. Michaela, is there much uptake for small group tuition? I could do a whole hour on group tutoring in China because it's taken me, I'd say, 3 years to get it right. Yes, there is an uptake for it, but you have to do it right. And I have learnt the hard way what happens when you kind of go into it blindly. So I tried to run group classes the way I'd run them in the UK, and they did not work. I'm more than happy to talk about that separately, but I think that that's a massive. I've just done a podcast on it, about 3 episodes on group classes in China. So if you want to listen to that, and then I can talk about that separately. But yes, it's there is the short answer. Okay, can I go to the next slide, please, Julie? I think I've answered all the questions, I hope. Okay, so this is crucial. 95% of the students I work with come to the UK. They come to a boarding school. So it's absolutely crucial that you understand the boarding school market, even if you've never had anything to do with it. It's really important. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, sorry, there we go, thank you. So again, sort of at the basic level, you need to be aware of what the top London day schools are. And, oh, there's not a capital letter on London, I'm so sorry, that's really upset me. And boarding schools nationally. That's hugely important. And again, I'm happy to share that information with you. It's not a secret. And I've got that from both working with the BSA as a boarding school agent and also what I've gleaned from Chinese families over the years. Okay, the next stage is understanding why you need to have that in-depth knowledge of the English boarding school systems. And if you want to support families long-term, you need to understand which schools they're looking for and how you're going to support them with that. So that's definitely key. And then it's how you present that knowledge. So I will do, at the moment, I can't do webinars to a Chinese audience because then we're not allowed to. So foreigners are not allowed to do that. So, but up until a year ago, I would be doing webinars on a probably 3 monthly basis to parents looking for tutoring in order to come to the UK. So I would talk about co-ed schools that are popular. I talk about single-sex schools are popular because many Chinese parents want single-sex schools for their children. So I would talk about the single-sex schools we have in the UK. We had a couple of webinars about, they were very worried about the VAT. At this point, we had no idea what was going on. So, it was very sort of difficult to talk about, but they are very aware of the situation in the UK, and they just wanted to perhaps have that assurance of what the landscape, the educational landscape was going to look like. So how you present that knowledge is really, really important. And one of the reasons that I'm going to China next year is because I can't do these webinars right now. So I need to be in person doing that in order to kind of share with them what I'm unable to do online right now. So at the moment, the webinars I do tend to be for Chinese families that are based in the UK. Now, stage 4 is, again, one of the reasons I have Chi, one of the reasons I belong to the BSA, one of the reasons I'm constantly looking at what's coming out there. Because there are changes that happen all the time. So, if I give you a really micro example, two two families were looking to bring their daughters over to a school in the UK. They'd be full boarders. The agent named the schools, and I said, well, you know, are you aware that on a Friday, most of those students be camped back to London? They would be virtually on their own in the boarding house. They're not going to be getting that rich English language. And that was a change in the school that happened this year. Equally, there was another family that I was preparing for, and the agent said they need to do the pre-test ICB, which is one form of assessment. I said, but the school's changed now and they are doing, they're only doing Cat 4. And I have to be constantly keeping myself up to date in order to know that. Otherwise, I'm preparing a child for the wrong exam. And then that sort of reflects badly on me. So you've always got to try and stay as ahead of the changes as you can, but all of us who work in education know that sometimes that's very, very difficult. But you want to remain that agent's top point of contact. If they have an issue, you want them to come to you, no matter kind of what it is, whatever stage it is. Okay, thank you, Julius. Okay, so this is just a way that you can connect with me. A fancy barcode that you can scan. I think it just takes you straight to my website. I thought that was the easiest way to do it. But I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have. Maybe I've answered them all. Oh, Catherine, I can see your hand up. Hi, Catherine. Oh, you're on mute though, which is, I think. Oh, there we go. Hi, Catherine.
Hi. Do you have experience of other markets apart from China?
Yes, so I have agents in South and Central America, and Middle East, and a handful in across Europe. And then British boarding. I have quite a good relationship with a British boarding school agent who supports children, families in the civil service and the army.
And did that just come about through, you know, contacts, networking?
Oh, everything. Yeah, I won't pretend that it happened organically, Catherine, because that would be a lie. But I suppose I was sort of prolific on just getting out there. So the agent list that I'll share with everybody, there's one that I just went through everybody on that list in, you know, Central America. Now, the thing is, I think it's worth mentioning that I went down a few rabbit holes where I was contacting agents in, I think it was Mexico, but for me, it was a complete waste of time because they were all going on to schools in the US. So, and I don't know the American system. So I wasted all this time on meetings and it didn't get me anywhere. Equally, there were some I was working with in South America where they were never going to pay me what I was charging. So it was a huge amount of wasted time in that. But yeah, I got a lot of business from LinkedIn. So I was sort of crafting posts on LinkedIn, writing articles that got agents to me. But a lot of the time, I was going out there and finding them. I would go to events. I would go to in-person events. I would go to things where I knew the agents were. So certain events at boarding schools. But yeah, there was a lot of me going out literally, but also online and trying to find, you know, people that I wanted to work with. But to start with, it was very much, okay, if I want to work in the daytime, where should I be looking? Okay, it's Southeast Asia. And then the Middle Eastern work kind of came in, that came to me through a couple of contacts and through somebody found me in LinkedIn. And then the European ones, I sought those out myself. So for example, I knew that my daughter is at boarding school and I knew that she had lots of German students who went to her school. German students tend to come over for a short period of time. So I contacted an agent that placed German students in British schools and got some work from her. So it's that kind of stuff, if that helps.
Thank you.
Okay. How do I know about the student's background? I'm looking at the question. So how do you know about the student's background? I ask as much as I can. So I will ask the school reports if they're in an international school and they have, and it's in English. If it's in Mandarin, I give it to Chi and I say, can you tell me what they're saying? But often there's always the sort of the profile in terms of percentages or grades, so I can see where a student's at. I always get them to do an assessment. So no matter what subject they're doing, they do some kind of an assessment with me, whether it's a Cat 4 or English or math. And I always meet with them first, because I've had so many students that look fantastic on paper and they're saying, right, this is a child that we want to go to Wickham Abbey, or for example, then I will speak to them and their English is very weak. So that tells me that I then need to spend a huge amount of time with them before we're even thinking about those kinds of schools. So, but yeah, I get as much as I can, but I'll be completely honest with you. It's not always, you don't always know. And it's the same with any student you take on, isn't it? You don't always know what you're getting. But I try and extract as much information as I can.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I don't have any relationship with agents in Canada, I'm afraid. I can share agent lists with agents in Canada, but I don't have any that I work with, unfortunately. That time zone doesn't help me. So I have students in Central and South America, and I was tutoring them, but it sort of meant that I was tutoring from early in the morning until very late at night because of the time difference. So I pass those on to my tutors who are in that geographical area now. My services guide is not on my website. No, I share that with people who do my program with me, but it's not on my website. I think if it's got your prices, your background, and the schools that you have worked with, that's what they want to see, and keep it short. Agents do not want to see a lengthy services guide. My website, yeah, I can give you that. That's fine. Agencies for beginners. I think to start with, get everything in place. Make sure that your LinkedIn profile is looking good, and then get your services guide sorted. And when you've got that, then I would start reaching out to the agents. Now, rather than kind of seeing it as for beginners, if you go to the Boarding School Association, the agents on there, and I'm on there, the agents on there are, they've all been accredited, so they've all gone through an accreditation process. And I would start with those. You've got China, Thailand, or every country imaginable. So start with them. I do have a website. I've got 2 websites. So Julius, can I pop those in the chat? Is that okay? So this is I can't talk and type clearly. That's my website, tutoring. And this is my website where I mentor tutors. My podcasts, yes. It's called Tutoring the World. Now, if you find that, it's on Spotify and all sorts. If you have a question a burning question that you want answering, if you message me either on Instagram or LinkedIn or anywhere else, I will do an episode on it. So at the moment, I've only started the podcast 6 weeks ago, and I've done how to work with agents, group tutoring in China, because it's such a different way of doing it, and I can't remember, and then a little bit about my journey. But if you have something that you want me to talk about, just let me know and I'll put that in an episode. Interestingly, Tracy, I have had an agent reach out to me yesterday about Italian students coming over to the UK for just for a term, and so but I haven't got back to her yet. The other thing worth mentioning probably is the vast number of students who come over for summer schools. So if you want to get a sense of what it's like to work with international students, and actually in person, look at the summer schools, the summer camps that are being run. They're hugely popular. There was a big dip over COVID, as you can imagine, but we now get so many international students coming over to summer camps, and they're always looking for tutors. Greek students looking for international tuition. I imagine so, but that is not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to pretend. I don't think I've ever had a Greek student. I'm so sorry, I can't be more helpful, but I'm sure there are. And again, if I share agent lists, I have no doubt there'll be Greek agents on there. Okay. I think I've answered all the questions on the chat, Julia, I think.
That's great, Sarah. Thanks so much. Does anyone else have any further questions for Sarah now? Otherwise, I think as Sarah's put her emails or her website.
Oh, have I put it on? I thought my website's on there, so you can contact me through that. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah,
and also I think they can search for you on LinkedIn as well, and
yeah, I'm on there as Sarah Capewell on LinkedIn, and I'm if you want to, I'm on Instagram. I do videos like stories. I'm showing my age here, aren't I? Videos. I do stories every day, usually based on something to do with working in the international market or how to work with agents or something. I mean, if I go to a meeting or I've met with an agent or I've signed an agent deal or whatever, I tend to talk about it that day so that you're getting that kind of, I suppose, live insight into what I'm doing. So yeah, Instagram, I'm there as asta.academy UK, and then LinkedIn, it's my name, Sarah Capewell.
Perfect. And Rose was just saying, I think a couple of other people have also mentioned about the agent list. Is that something they can contact you about, and you're happy to share it?
Yeah, I share everything as much as I can with people. So yes, agent list, and I'll direct them to various places they can find them as well. It's no problem.
Great. Is there any further questions for Sarah while we have her? It's been really informative and really, really kind of interesting as well too about your experience, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. I've loved it. Thanks, everybody.
Perfect. So if that's it, I will stop recording. Thanks so much, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks for joining, and thanks again, Sarah.
All right, bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.